She wants to come over to this paddock, and the gate's wide open, and the poor thing, who is that? Is that Venus? I'm your Venus, I'm your fire. She can't figure it out. Bless her heart. So, good morning, guys. Okay, this is part 2 of a video duo I'm doing today. There's so much to talk about this week. Give me a hug. So, if you're seeing this video right now and you're like, what is that poor girl doing? I know, I'll explain in a second. But I want you to watch the video prior to this one because I kind of talk about how I'm going to talk about this. And I want you to see the one prior to this, before this one. You don't have to, but it will help make some sense, or, you know, I hope I make sense. It is Monday. It could be debatable. We're going to try. Come here and give me a huggy. What you been doing? Did you have a good weekend? So we had a great weekend. I talk about some of the things that we did prior. And this is a video that I promised you last week. And, you know, life's happened. Things are happening and this or that. But this is big time on my mind. And actually, I'm glad I waited a day or two because I started thinking more about it. And I'm realizing more important things, which coincides with the video prior to this. I'm just telling you. So, listen, hope you're doing well. We're moving into fall. Like I said prior in the video, we're going to have the persimmon reading coming up. I've got some persimmons. So, it's the preliminary forecast, okay? So, we always try to do it 2 times. I do it around this time of the year. And then, of course, usually by the end of September into early October, if I still have persimmons. Now, a lot of people say, oh, it has to be ripe and you have to have a frost. Not to read the seeds, you don't. That's malarkey. Now, obviously, the more developed the fruit is, the harder the seed and more developed the shell, if you will, the hull or whatever, the husk, whatever, the harder exterior. It is easier to crack them, but that's not always the case. So it has nothing to do with whether you see a spoon, a fork, or a knife. It does determine if you kind of bite too much because it's too soft of a seed, but the hull, but the inside is usually already shaped. So that's a bunch of malarkey, okay? Malarkey. The only thing Joe Biden provided to this country, and he doesn't even know he did it, but bless his heart, is malarkey. That's like one of my favorite words right now. Okay, it has been for years. Malarkey. That's a bunch of malarkey. So I want to talk to you about something because I think this is something that people in my region, we always like to have these debates and fights about who's Southern, country, Appalachian. My mama didn't do that and you're not doing it. You're not doing it right. I think all of that is crazy town stupid. You know, my family is my mom's side. My dad's side is from basically Ireland. Scotland, but in England, but Virginia, North Carolina, and then post-Revolutionary War is when you started to see them migrate into Tennessee, and before the Civil War, after the Civil War, they really pushed into West Tennessee. So my dad's from the west side of the state, okay, from Memphis to Jackson, okay, but my mama's side is all from East Tennessee, specifically East Tennessee, and a little section going over into past the Great Smoky Mountains into North Carolina, Cherokee County, Macon County, up to Burke and Buncombe, blah, 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 blah. My point is we've been here for generations upon generations. And the things that we eat is not necessarily the same thing that you might eat up in Kentucky or in Georgia, okay? There's always the baseline things of pinto beans, biscuits, cornbread, whatever, but people make them different. Just like, for example, I've never made chocolate gravy. We've already talked about that and discussed that, and everybody's fighting about it on Facebook and all this stupid stuff. My Nana to this day, and I've said this here, she'll snarl at you and say, we didn't make no chocolate gravy. She didn't even know what that was. Okay, she's going to be 89, okay? Born in a log cabin down the road, okay? They didn't have that. But my point is when you start changing your diet, you know, it sort of makes you a little heartbroken because you're like, does this mean I have to give up my cornbread, my biscuits? I mean, this is a mental play with me because Lord knows there are certain recipes I love, and there's certain things that I'm not gonna fully give them up. I'm gonna try to make them better or make them a treat because I see the difference in what's happening in my body. And I started thinking about how now not necessarily my mom and my nana as a child, which would be back in the 30s and the 40s. And this isn't even about the Great Depression per se. This is literally how people ate even prior to the Great Depression. In my family, in my region, from the Knoxville area, kind of sweeping down the Smoky Mountains, going over to North Carolina, I've got this one little circle there, okay? And I have been really thinking about and evaluating how they ate, what they ate, and with interviews with my Nana, who will be 89 years old. I also had the presence of her mother and her grandmother in my life until I was almost 16 years old. So I know how they even cooked and what they ate, even as, because I was with them half the time my whole, growing up, as they babysat me. I stayed with them in the summer. My mama worked and daddy worked. All the things I experienced as well. Things I watched them make, grow, can, all the things. So you see all this hillbilly recipe stuff all over the place. And some of these recipes are, casseroles and the way certain things are made. And you've seen a lot of these things really be made over the last 50 years, 50, 60 years. I'm going back further. I have a picture of my great-great-grandfather who was, he could read and write. He was a farmhand. He was a trainer at Camp Gordon, not Fort Gordon, Camp Gordon. It doesn't exist anymore in Georgia. The man ran hogs, ran mules, was a farmhand for a huge farm in Loudoun County. His entire family they were so poor. And I found a picture of him. I've had it for a couple of years where he's in his 50s. A couple of years before he died. He died of tuberculosis. Okay. But he's standing there, and he was about, I don't know, he looks to be about 6'1", or I think he was about 6'1", 6'2". Very slim, okay? And he had a head full of thick hair. And I'll attach the picture if I can. And he's standing there, I mean, mean and slim. But the thing that strikes me the most, and some of you may have pictures like this of your grandparents, the muscles and the veins in his forearms. Folks, quarterbacks in the SEC, their arms might look like that. And poor as dirt. And how did they eat? How did they stay slim? Folks, they had the crunchiest, see my fingers? The crunchiest diets. All the things that I'm trying to do is mimicking a lot of the things that in my region and my family, Appalachian folk at the foothills of the Smoky Mountains did and ate. So I got over myself really quick. I started paying attention and thinking about, and I have some of this recorded on this channel with my Nana. She talked about Great Depression eating, the rationing, the things that they did. So let's run through that. So my Nana talks about basically a lot of the times these people, they only ate 2 meals a day because they couldn't afford to do otherwise, and they had to make things stretch. Breakfast, now this is my family. What your family did is different, and I'm not arguing about it, okay? So I'm not saying my family's more Appalachian than yours. There's people that try to argue that stuff, and it's so ridiculous. We don't consider ourselves Southern, like Savannah. No, it was poor mountain people, okay? This is what they did, and this is why they could run mules till the day they died. They could work 2 jobs till the day they died. They had babies and grandbabies and did all the things till the day they died. Think about what they were not inundated with. Social media, for one. They didn't have a television. Didn't have it. They didn't even have indoor water or plumbing, my Nana will tell you, till the 50s. My family didn't. So think about this. So I asked my Nana, so let's recap. So in the morning, what was for breakfast? My Nana will tell you, see, my Nana had 3 brothers and sisters, so it was 4 little kids, her parents and her grandparents. They all lived together in a 2-bedroom little house. 3 of the 4 adults worked in order to even be able to afford what they had. They gardened like crazy. They had cherry trees, etc. And they ran mules, and they hunted when they could, okay? Fished when they could. But with 4 little babies to feed, you had to really make things stretch. I mean, we're talking about the outside job was a janitor, farming, and working at a candy factory, okay? On Martell Road, the candy factory. My great-grandmother worked there. And then eventually she ended up working for Standing Knitting Mill downtown. But my great-great-grandmother stayed home, kept the house, and kept the food going. And here's the main concentration of foods. For breakfast, they would have biscuits and milk gravy. Now, you sit there and you go, well, that doesn't sound healthy. Think about the flour that they would eat back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s compared to today. White flour, locally bought white flour. They had sausage gravy. They had sausage that they would slice. They did not dump. They did not do this. I never saw any of my grandmothers do this. You see people do this, and I'm like, that's some. I'm sorry, I can't do it. They take the tube, the whole pound of sausage, and dump it in the skillet, and then they make the gravy with it with the milk. No, that's not what they did here. That's not what they did. They were too poor. They would slice the sausage, fry it hard. Then they would take the grease and the remnants and make milk gravy. They separated that out to stretch the protein for maybe later in the day or whatever. They just didn't dump it and just dump it and then dump it. It did not work that way here. Maybe for you it did. Maybe for your mama it did. Maybe you like to do that today. I don't make gravy that way to this day because that's not how I was taught. They couldn't afford it. So you did have some carbs in the morning. You obviously had raw milk. They milked goats and dairy cows outside. I've got pictures of it. And my great-great-grandmother would milk them. She taught the kids how to milk. Goat or dairy cow, they had gravy. That's it. They might have some eggs because they had chicken, so you had your protein going on. You had sausage, and some of you are going, that's not healthy. When you raise your own hogs, and I'm not getting into this debate about, like, you shouldn't eat sausage. Shut up. You're on the wrong channel. Move. Go on. I don't want to talk about it. You're wasting everybody's time. This is not what that's about. So I'm just telling you, nobody's interested. Nobody wants to argue about that stuff. Nobody cares. I eat bacon every day right now. Every day. And I don't have a problem with it. And Jesus is my Savior. And I feel good about it. So I'm just saying, they would have that carb. They would have some of that. And they would have that protein with some eggs, with whatever they could spare with the eggs. They may or may not have lunch, depending upon. The kids would go to school. They had I had a great-great aunt. My great-great-grandmother's sister-in-law was the cook at this little school, and she could cook like nobody else. Healthy, homegrown, local stuff. So there's that, right? And so you have to remember, what are they using for a lot of the things they're cooking with? During that time period, and even prior, most likely lard. Okay? So think about how pure a lot of these foods were. Vegetables, corn, cream corn, pinto beans. It's very simple. My Nana would talk about they never made white bread. If they got white bread, they got it from the local rolling store. They would barter and trade for some white bread to have like a peanut butter sandwich. So there's peanut butter. They did eat peanut butter on bread, kind of a treat lunch. Maybe a little bit of homemade jelly or jam that my great-great-grandmother made from picked blackberries or her cherry trees or things like that. Think about that. Think about that. Apple butter wasn't a huge deal. Maybe a little honey, local honey, maybe or molasses was bigger than honey. So there was that. Dinner was always pinto beans and 1 to 2 vegetables. They did have cornbread, but what kind of cornbread was that? Back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s and prior, they would grind their own corn. What would they cook a lot of this stuff with? Butter or lard. You didn't have the chemicals. They drank raw milk. They drank fresh water. They didn't have pop. My Nana didn't understand bubble gum. I've got a story about her bubble gum. What was also on the dinner table at times? I can tell you this, growing up, this was huge, and it's huge. Beets. Red beets. My grandmothers, now they're trying to get you to buy all this beet stuff, supplement this. I've started taking it. I've started taking the beet supplement, beetroot. I'm taking it. I'm going to see how it works for me. Growing up and prior to that, my Nana will tell you, oh, beets, red beets, turnips, beets, huge, okay? Lots of beans, lots of turnip greens, lots of beets, lots of homegrown potatoes. Not sweet potatoes. They had red potatoes. They would have white potatoes. But think about if you're working all this time and you are not having all this processed stuff, you can afford to eat white potatoes. These people were not overweight. These people were not diabetic. These people were not eat up with a lot of they didn't get dementia. They didn't have cancer. None of these things happened. Like I said, an early death was due to a lot of times a rare freak accident or incident. Could be flu. It could be something simple as, a cut, which is obviously an infection. Or unfortunately, some people died of tuberculosis. And unfortunately, my great-great-grandfather did. I think he got it during World War I. I think that's where he actually caught it. But that's another debate. But also, coleslaw and sauerkraut. Kraut. Fermented sauerkraut in crocks all day long. What would they have for a dessert on a rare occasion? Some nights, oatmeal. They would make homemade oatmeal. Sometimes my Nana said we could have oatmeal for breakfast, but we also had to save it in case her daddy, wanted some oatmeal for dessert. That's all they had. Oatmeal. Good old oatmeal. And they'd put a little molasses on it or something like that. On Sunday is when they would have heavy meat. They would go kill a chicken. My great-great-grandmother would wring its neck, would wring its neck, and then my great-great-grandfather taught my Nana how to singe the fat, pluck it and singe it. I had this all on audio, okay? It's on here on this channel. Sunday was meat day. It would be rabbit, maybe a ham, only a couple of hams during the year. They saved a lot of that for holiday. But it was mainly chicken or maybe some turkey, lean chicken, or like I said, rabbit. Or I'm telling you rabbit, because my granddaddy would go out and I have his rifle. I have my great-great-grandfather's rifle. I have his rifle and his shotgun. And he would go out and he'd kill a rabbit. And the reason they did that on Sunday afternoons is because the Preacher Jackson would come and eat with them. So on that day, they would make a dessert. My Nana, I've said this on many videos, that entire family, 8 people, 4 adults, 4 children, during all that time period, they were allowed to have 1 cup of sugar a week. I want you to think about that. You'd probably drink and eat a cup of sugar a day, especially if you have a Coke and sweet tea and a ho-ho cake and a Twinkie and this or that or the other. I'm not judging you. I'm just saying, I want you to think about that. A cup of pure sugar for either a cake or cookies. And they did that because they knew the preacher was coming. So they had to share it. So 8 to 10 people, because the preacher was married, right? So 8 to 10 people would eat a dessert on a Sunday afternoon that had been made with 1 cup of sugar. And we wonder what's wrong with us today. So I'm evaluating my diet, right? And these are a lot of, I'm eating sauerkraut. I'm putting I'm making beet juice. I'm taking beetroot. I'm eating bacon and eggs and oatmeal for breakfast. Man, it charges me up like crazy. I'm trying to eat lean. I'm eating leaner meats because my husband needs to, but they didn't eat. I'm like, did y'all ever have she said, we didn't eat a bunch of hamburger and steak and stuff like that, roast. She said, we couldn't afford it. She said, we killed a chicken. He went and got a rabbit. We would have some bacon. She said we would have some ham, but they were saved more for special times. Leather breeches, green beans, fresh vegetables, whatever they could do. It depended on the time of year. But if you start looking at what all these, whoa. Cottage cheese. My Nana taught me how to make cottage cheese. In my earlier videos on this channel, I make cottage cheese in the Learn It to Burn It. My 30-day challenge back in earlier days in the channel, I did a 30-day challenge, and I make cottage cheese right in front of you. And I make cottage cheese on that video from my dairy cow. My Nana's favorite thing to eat growing up was cottage cheese. To this day, one of my Nana's favorite things to eat, 2 things actually, she loves homemade cottage cheese. It almost makes her cry when she talks about it because that was so special to her. That was such a delicacy to her, and they loved it. High protein. They might make some pimento cheese. They didn't make bread. They weren't out eating hamburgers and fries and milkshakes and weird casseroles with all these chemicals in it. Nope, that is a lie. So when we talk about Appalachian diet and a lot of the things that we eat Sunday afternoon at the potluck, is that really what your great-great-great-granny was eating? Most likely not, at least not in my case. And I love a broccoli casserole and a chicken casserole, okay? I know, I get it. I mean, a lot of things have changed over the years. But if you want to talk about that's not a regional diet, that's not how our people ate. Yeah, it is. The things I'm doing right now, there might be some change up. I mean, sure, avocado. I'm sure my Nana didn't eat avocado. They had rice. So I'm going to say that when you look at these hardcore lean and meat diets and people are getting the protein and they're getting healthy carbs and they're working out, I'm noticing the same thing over and over and over again. And I go, that's the way my Nana ate as a kid. Give or take a little bit. Spices might be different. Frequency might be a little bit different. That's how they ate. That's why they could do all that they were doing. That's how they lived. That's how they lived. That's all they knew. Let's not question it. I mean, you want to have some broccoli casserole at the potluck on Sunday? Get you some. Okay. But to say that's how we ate the last 40 or 50, how we've been eating for generations upon generations with Ritz crackers, that's not true. At least not in my case. Tell me your thoughts. There's a lot of other things they probably did. Chocolate was a total treat. My Nana got a whooping because she went to the hen house and took eggs so when the rolling store came through, she could trade to get some candy. They didn't have this access to this crap all the time. And the saddest part about it is when they ate a chocolate bar or they ate some candy, is it the same crap your kids are eating today and you ate? Probably not. Food, Appalachian, food for thought. Everything was from scratch. And the ingredients, even if they were considered a treat, were locally sourced, locally picked, homegrown, and so natural. That's why they could do what they did. And that's how you're going to win. So don't let people try to make you think like you're abandoning your heritage because you're making a bowl today with rice, turkey, and some sauerkraut on the side. No, and some cottage cheese. Honey, my Nana would beat you down for some cottage cheese. I'm just saying. Like, subscribe, and share. Pray, prep, and be peaceful. Think about it. Get back to your roots. I'll see you on the next video.